All right, so let's get started. I'm Jonathan. I'm a product manager at Adobe. I'm currently working on the XT team. But my journey at Adobe didn't really start with product management or with XT. Um, I was a part of a team that was tasked with rebuilding Dreamweaver back in 2016. And I joined Adobe as an experienced designer. So my role was to rethink the UI, the overall experience, work with engineering on the architecture, and tackling much bigger problems like the perception around this tool. Uh, and along with that, I also now I'm working on XT as a product manager focused on design and prototyping. And for me, what this represents is an amazing journey I've had, where I've worked on two very different products. One that has a legacy of almost 19 years, and another product which is pretty new and built from ground up. So today, what I really want to talk to you all about is a short summary of this journey and the lessons I've personally learned out of this entire experience. So think of this as a behind the scenes, a little sneak peek of how we go about building product at Adobe. There are a lot of things in this you've probably heard, you've probably seen earlier. The thing I encourage you all is to take as much as you all can and apply it to the work you all are doing and see how that works. So I want to talk about three specific areas: product philosophy, and just shed some light on how we've gone about asking ourselves some really tough questions, answering those questions, being really brutally honest with ourselves. Then talk about craftsmanship, and when we think about building product that scales for the next 10 years, how do we think about reinventing our own process within Adobe? The XD team was an example of a startup itself running within a giant like Adobe, and just challenging some of the ways we've been building product over the last couple of years. And finally, the last piece is people. And for me, this is the most important part about building a product: the team you build, the team you invest in, and the way you scale that team. So for the first piece, I want to talk about a question we asked ourselves: does software have an expiration date? And this was a tough question we had to answer, especially for Dreamweaver. Why is Dreamweaver still around? Like, why didn't we think about building a new web tool from scratch? Why did we go build XT, a completely new tool, and not really try and rebuild Photoshop from scratch? And when we think of this, we think of our everyday life. When you buy something, it could be a perishable good, it could be an electronic. There are a couple of questions you ask yourself. Does this have warranty? Does it have an extended warranty? Is this a perishable item? When is it best before? And it begged to question, do we have the same questions in our mind when we download and install a software? Have you ever thought about, how long will the software really work for me? And I think this is one of the interesting things about software. The expiration date for a software is not actually stamped by the creator, it's stamped by the consumer, which is the total opposite of the rest of the stuff you buy today. And the way we go about thinking about this question is we asked ourselves, in terms of Dreamweaver, does it really solve a customer problem in a way that it delights the customer? And for Dreamweaver, the second half of that question was a little bit tricky. It was definitely not a delightful experience. The web and the medium had evolved so fast that we couldn't catch up. And the experience of now authoring within that tool was broken. When we asked ourselves the same question for screen design, we quickly realized that, well, Photoshop and Illustrator were never actually built for the UX challenges of today. And we don't want to keep bloating those products by adding features that were never really meant to be a part of that product to begin with. So that's how we went about figuring out, well, for Dreamweaver, we do have some scope of just enhancing the current experience, solving certain issues around performance, perception, architecture, and sort of modernizing it for the current web. With screen design, we faced a completely different challenge. We knew we had to start from ground up. We knew we needed a completely new tool because the tools that existed today within Adobe weren't going to scale. Now, we've all probably heard this several times. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. But the thing I want to focus on here is the first part of that sentence, the word prepare in itself. And the reason I say that is when I think of running a marathon, the most challenging part of that entire experience is not burning out. It's pacing yourself and sort of just getting across that finish line. And building product is no different. Over a period of time, you will find yourself at the start, at the back, among the crowd, and you will be tempted to cut corners, you will be tempted to slow down, you will be tempted to run ahead. And it's very natural that your process of building product will evolve and change depending on the circumstances that you are in. But there's one way to sort of help you on that journey and prepare better for it. And that goes back to principles. What we did with XD was we established a vision for what we wanted to achieve. And then once we had that vision, we defined a set of principles. These principles actually exist in the form of a document that we hand out to anyone who joins the XD team on their first day. It's not a document that enforces the way we build product, but it's a document we share with the team to help everyone align on a vision and give them the tools they require to really run this marathon. So here's what the 3 principles were for XD. Lightweight and approachable, remove friction everywhere, transparent and open. And one of the things that Tom, who was a part of the early team, said was, principles will help you scale your vision. They help you go through this process of building product over years. To give you an example of how we applied this within the product, when we think of lightweight and approachable, we challenged ourselves with XD to think about how we build a tool from ground up that has just one toolbar and one property inspector on the right, which is totally different from the way we built product at Adobe prior, where we've had panels which needed to be docked for every different workflow. In terms of approachable, we've tried to keep the entire experience of the app lightweight. We've tried to build it in a way where anyone who wants to get started with screen design can easily pick up the app and start working with it. We look for every opportunity we can find to remove friction, and one of the examples I have is around sharing. When we spoke to the community, we realized that the amount of time you spend in actually exporting your designs, uploading them, then getting feedback, collating that feedback from multiple channels, and then sort of making revisions is a tedious process. It takes you forever. So we sought opportunities like that, where we built in workflows like being able to publish a prototype, being able to get design specs, which you could share with your developer right within the application itself. So again, going back to the principle of trying to remove friction as often as possible and building the app in a way that's approachable. And I lost my slide. All right, there we go. The next one was community, and I was really excited to see a lot of talks today sort of touch on this topic around leveraging the community, being a part of the community. And with XD, we've sort of had this as a fundamental pillar of how we've shaped the product. But before I get into this, I want to show you something really interesting. These are actual product requirement documents written for Dreamweaver way back in, I think, 1997, October. And I don't know if you can read this all the way from back there, but the top right corner says, both these documents are rough drafts. I look forward to your feedback. Thanks, Kevin. That's Kevin Lynch, who's currently the VP of technology at Apple. And this was some of the early work he had done at Adobe with Macromedia for the first release of Dreamweaver. Someone pointed out today morning that the document on the left is actually a requirements doc for layers for Navigator inside of Dreamweaver. But when I think of how we've traditionally written requirements for our products, we've always started with a problem. We've started with defining those problems and moved on from there. With XD, we did something slightly different. We went to the community. We started this thing, this platform, we built a page on user voice, which allowed the community to start feeding in requests around what would they want to see in a design tool, what are the challenges they face with prototyping. And we started from here, and this is something we keep really close to our hearts in terms of how we go about shaping the roadmap. This is not a one-time thing. It's a conversation we build with the community where every time a new feature comes in, someone from the team reviews it and tags it with either it's in the backlog or it's being worked upon or we need more clarity or information to understand more. And the reason I show you this is not to say that the way product requirements were written earlier were wrong and the way to do it now is the community. The reason I show you this is because I believe we are at a point in time where connecting with the end user is easier than ever. We have more means of reaching our end user than we did a year ago. So it would be a missed opportunity for us if, as a part of building product, we don't actually leverage these different channels to really be a part of the community, build that empathy, and be the voice of the customer in our process of building it. The other thing we asked ourselves was, and we ask this question very often, 5 years from now, where do we want to go 5 years from now? Do we build another tool after that? Do we scale XD? Is XD going to be around 5 years? And this is a tough question because you can never really predict the right answer. In fact, every time we've tried answering this question, we go back at the end of the year and look at this and look and check and see if the features we shipped map to this. And very often they don't. They change because several factors influence the way you build your product. One of the things that we often ask our team every month is, what's going to be your favorite feature 1 year from now, 5 years from now? And the thing I love the most is this quote that I got from one of my designers, Glaren, who said, today we hear designers or we hear people say things like, can you Photoshop that for me? And we want to think of reaching a point where someone says, can you XD that? Scott Belsky actually says, we believe that XD at some point is going to be bigger than Photoshop in the years to come. But a part of asking ourselves the question of where we are going to be in 5 years also needs another question to complement that, which is, how will we fail? And I think this is a much more important question that we regularly need to keep asking ourselves. When we thought about XD and we said, OK, this is great. We are close to shipping a 1.0 product. But what are the things that could make us fail? And for XD, we identified 2 areas. One was a feature race. Now, one of the things we've learned over a period of time with Photoshop and Illustrator is these products tend to scale over a period of time. They have a long legacy, and sometimes you carry that baggage across over several years. So with XD, we knew if we got into that process of just adding features, we would be Photoshop for the wrong reasons very soon. At the same time, inextensible. A part of being with the community and building with the community, we quickly realized that while we try to safeguard performance and quality, we can't do that in isolation. We have to open up the platform for the community to contribute. And that tremendously shaped the way we are now sort of working on extensibility and sort of started deploying a bit of it on Mac and then slowly on Win as well. Craftsmanship. So with XD, one of the things we are doing is reimagining screen design, but more importantly, we are also reimagining the way Adobe has been building products. XD has been that first step within Adobe where we've really rethought how we build software. Simple examples like the fact that XD is a native application on Mac and Win is very different from the way Adobe's traditionally done this. Simplicity and attention to detail. Now, one of the things with XD was when we try to remove friction and try to solve workflows, very often we get carried away easily to add more features or to add a button or an icon. And with XD, the thing that keeps us up at night is how do we keep the app simple, but also powerful enough to solve workflows like this. So I want to give you a quick example of where we've taken a very common workflow and then imagined how we want designers to actually solve this problem today and in the years to come. So here I have an example of a web page that I was designing inside of XD. And what I have here is a simple row that I want to repeat a couple of times. Now, we've all done this in several different ways. We start off by copying it, then we paste, and then we try to position it. Now, XD does a pretty good job at giving you the highlights for the padding and the margins, but it's still a pretty tedious process to constantly copy, paste, position. And then not just that, now having to update the content within each of them is a time-consuming process as well. So we looked at some of these very common repeated tasks that designers do, and questions saying, can we reinvent some of these very basic workflows? So for this specific workflow, we introduced a feature a while ago called the repeat grid. How many of you all out here have actually tried the repeat grid? OK. So the way this feature works is you select the object you want to repeat, go ahead, click on that button, and now you notice you get a handle which allows you to quickly drag. So in one single click, I've been able to repeat the same object several times. Now, this is great. It helped me replicate that really quick. But what if I want to adjust the spacing? Now, traditionally, if you copy-pasted this, you would manually have to move each thing up, back and forth. With the repeat grid, you can just hover over the padding and adjust all of that while maintaining the group. So again, thinking about how we remove friction, how we keep it simple, but also care about the minute details in that workflow, not just the starting point. Now, this is great. It's kind of got me, I would say 30%. I still have to update all of the content. Now, we know this is tedious because you got to go in, double-click, manually type inside of each layer. To solve that workflow, what we came up with was a way in which you can select a layer, and now what I'm going to do is simply take a simple text file that I have. This text file has a bunch of places inside of it. I'm just going to go select that layer, drag this text file over, drop it, and in one single click, I was able to populate the entire repeat grid with text. And I could do this for multiple text layers, and I could even do this with images. So here I have another example where I created this little grid using the repeat grid. And now what I'm going to actually do is select the shape. I'm going to multi-select a bunch of images. OK. And then, whoops. Let's just take these for now. This is the hardest part of the demo, selecting images. All right. I'm just going to do one for now. There's something wrong with my trackpad. But you could pretty much select multiple images and drop them into the grid, and we populate the entire thing for you. So again, a very simple example of where we've looked at common workflow and imagined how we could do it better. I want to show you one more quick example of this. We are working on a new feature which allows you to fix elements inside of XD. So here I have a header, which I want to keep fixed as you scroll through. So now I have an option to say fixed position. And once I do that, I can pretty much achieve something like this. But here's where we went one step ahead and paid attention to the detail in this. So here I have an example where I have multiple objects. Some have blurs, some have opacity. And I've actually fixed the position for multiple objects. And now if I actually scroll through the preview window, you can see how the blur actually renders in real time as you scroll. So again, subtle details like this, where we pay close attention to how we can actually help you translate your designs into prototypes that are more expressiveness and have much more richness to them. The next thing I want to talk about is quality and performance. One of the things we take a lot of pride in at the XD team is the way we've built our quality standards and the level of performance we have within the application. And this did not come for free. It was an expensive task, but it is something we invested in for the long run. To give you a simple example of how we think about performance in XD, a couple of releases back, we shipped a feature called the symbol library, and that allowed you to just add symbols to it. At that point in time, you really couldn't do much with symbols inside of XD. You could just add a symbol and reuse it. So we asked ourselves, how many users do we think would actually add symbols, given it's pretty limited? We agreed upon saying, on an average, maybe 20, but not everyone who's using XD. But then we asked ourselves another question. We said, well, assume we had overrides. and you were able to resize, then what's the number? Probably 50 plus. Well, what about states and nested symbols? Like if we supported all of that, where would we be? 150. Now thinking about design systems and link symbols, where would that go? Probably over 200. And what we did was we benchmarked our performance goals for 200 symbols on the very first release itself. And that was not because we were over-ambitious. It was because we built the foundation for performance as a part of our process. And with every release, we sort of iterate on those same questions. We ask ourselves, are they using symbols at the way we expected them to use, or are they using it more commonly? And then we fix those numbers, we fix those equations. Now, one of the things I mentioned earlier was around having those principles that guide you on your vision. While building product, it's very common that you can sometimes cut corners and sometimes choose scope over quality and compromise on quality. But one of the things that we've championed with the team is we always focus on the quality and we adjust the scope to tell the right story. So an example of this was going back to the same thing we just spoke about. We shipped something known as the asset panel last year. But prior to it being an asset panel, it was called a symbol library. So it only had symbols. The release after that, we added colors and character styles and sort of evolved that panel to talk about assets. Then we gradually added the ability to search and reverse highlight. And now we are shipping a completely new feature which gives you the ability to rename your colors, reorder them, rename your symbols, rename all of your text styles, and workflows like this. So really what we've done is try to focus on sequencing our work, scoping our work in a way where we're able to tell a story to the end user. When I spoke about performance and the way we set benchmarks, this is just an example of where we started out with one artboard and then really started pushing the limits of XD and saying, well, how far could we really go? When does this break? And trust me, there are engineers who are so passionate about this stuff on the XD team that it's hard to actually sometimes tell them, can we work on this feature? Like, we're good for now, we can come back to this. And even with, so many artboards, you can see the panning and zooming, all of this is, butter smooth within XD. So again, going back to the fact that, focusing on the performance, focusing on the quality has been a key distinguishing factor for us. The last part of building product, the one I love the most, is people. And for me, my journey would have been incomplete if it wasn't for the people I've met, learned, been mentored by. And when I think of people, what happens is very often we don't focus on how we build our teams. We always focus on how we build product. We focus on how we scale the product. We think of where our product's going to be 10 years from now. But we don't ask questions like, how do we scale our team? Where do we think individuals on our team will be 5 years from now? Or how do we help our team scale? So the first thing I want to talk about is investing in your team. And I can't stress how important this is. And we do this not just at the start, but through every part of our journey with XD and other products within Adobe. One of the things we've championed on the XD team is building our team with diversity. At this point, we actually have a fun game where every time we meet for a team all hands, we try to pick a country and see if we don't actually have someone working from there right now. And a part of diversity is not just geographical, but also experience, age, skill set, ethnicity, several other factors. And what that really brings is a collection of thoughts, opinions, and opportunities for us to learn and grow. I think one of the things the team believes in is the more diversity we've had and the more we've scaled, the more empathy we've learned to build, not just for the customers, but for each other and as a team. Our biggest strength is our team at the end of the day. That's what's going to help us get across that finish line. And not just building, but also investing and finding ways in which you can scale that team. This is a quick little collage of some of the folks on the XD team on the product management side. One of the things I've learned across Dreamweaver and XD is we benefit from each other's skills. You have to feed off passion. You have to find folks on your team, find their passion, and channel that. And that's how we've actually built several features in XD, and we've focused on specific things like performance and quality, because that's been something someone's been extremely passionate about and has wanted to champion across the team. So again, just identifying people on your team, identifying what drives them, what pushes them, what ticks them, and sort of using that to really help them scale as well as your team scale. A large part of this is actually building trust. You can only scale when you start trusting in the rest of your team and the larger organization. For the last part of my talk, which I tend to refer to as pilots and trust, I learned something completely outside product development that I brought back to my team. And this goes back to Thanksgiving last year. I jumped off a boat with 80 other crazy swimmers and swam back from Alcatraz to San Francisco. And something about that journey really changed the way I look at how teams are. Now, when you're swimming out there in the ocean, they tell you to aim for a specific building. Like in this case, it was like, you got to swim to the ferry building. And from that vantage point, you can't see shit. So, and it doesn't help because I've got glasses and lenses. So when I'm in the water, I have none of this. So it's a complete blur to me. But I still somehow managed to finish that swim. And a part of it has to do with the fact that there's a whole bunch of folks out there on kayaks and skips who are constantly guiding you through the swim. They're called pilots. They are trained to help swimmers get across the finish line for big open water swims. Now, these pilots do something that you can't do. When you're swimming, your head's constantly down. You're counting your strokes. You're controlling your breathing. You're trying not to panic about the stuff you see below you. You're trying not to obsess about the fact that there could be anything behind you at this point in time. And the pilots watch out for things that you can't. For example, the pilots are making sure you don't drift off and wash up somewhere else. They're watching out for changing currents. They're watching out for the tides. They're watching out for any dangers because you are swimming in open waters. And just making sure that you are safe. And that forced me to think about the fact that, well, product development's no different. It's pretty easy for someone to be passionate about something, focus on something they love, or focus on tough problems, and then forget about the rest. And you can rat hole into something very specific and lose vision of the larger picture. So when I think of what the role of a pilot was, the pilot's role is to help you navigate while monitoring current tides, danger, temperature drops, etc. And I came back to the team and I asked my team, I said, this is what happened on my swim. I want to know if we have pilots for our product as well. And they said, what do you mean? I said, we need pilots to help us as we go building product, because very often we are not going to be able to do the things we are able to do today. We are going to have to scale, and we need support. So the way we went about doing this is we actually added a lot of partner teams into our product development process. We brought in teams like our customer success team, our sales team, our support team, our business development teams. And what these teams basically represent is a bunch of folks who are passionate about building product, but represent the product team out in the field. So they are watching out for us, working with our customers, working with enterprise teams, coming back and feeding all the information to us saying, hey, this thing you guys were working on, this is the feedback we've got. They don't actually do things this way. Or this is the way they store their files, and this is not the way they do. So having these people partner with us and be incorporated in the product development process has definitely helped us keep focus on where we are headed, but also make sure that someone's watching out for changing requirements, change in trends, competition, market changes. And sort of this is an example of where you slowly start building trust in order to scale yourself, scale your organization, scale your process. And this is difficult. This is challenging and very, very difficult. But with time, it's one of the most crucial things to be able to run that marathon and not burn out. The last piece is celebrate. When I finished that swim, there was a bottle of Jameson and hot coffee waiting for me on the beach. But there was a question that someone asked me the next day which stuck. The question was, Jonathan, when you hit the 1 mile mark and you were in the deep water channel, did you turn back to look at Alcatraz? And I was like, no. And then she asked me, she said, well, what about once you reach the entrance of the aquatic park, did you see the two humpback whales breach near the Fort Mason? And I was like, thank God, no. Like, that's the last thing I wanted to know when I was in the water. But the thing that stuck was, I was happy I finished the swim, but a lot of that journey was a blur to me because I was so focused on just getting across that finish line and not really dying. Which forced me to think, it's very easy while building product that you're so focused on delivering a product, meeting your goals, you forget to celebrate the journey. A large part of building the product is actually building memories along the way. And with XD, one of the things we constantly do is we celebrate every success, we celebrate every failure, because you learn and you scale and you grow. But you also celebrate every individual. Just yesterday at the company meeting, we celebrated a bunch of anniversaries. And typically the anniversaries we do is like 5 and 10 years and 15 years. Yesterday we did 20 years and 30 years. And it's actually a testament to the fact that, Adobe is such a diverse place to work in terms of just the way we build product, the way we build our teams, the way we've invested over a period of years. It's a real fun place. But coming back to this, the journey and the people is what matters the most while building product. You have to take the time to celebrate, have to take the time to pause from what you're doing, to really look back and see how far you've come, how much you've accomplished. Because sometimes it's very easy to be sort of bowed down by saying, oh, well, we've still got a long way to go. We've still got a bunch of this to do and like a bunch of that to do. But celebrating is an important part of that journey. This is the XT team when we hit our 1.0 milestone. It started out with literally 4 people. This still does not depict the size of the team that's working on XT, but this is all we could cram into one frame. So really thinking, like, what I want you all to take back today is, like, no matter what you're building, whether it's a digital product or not a digital product, think about the philosophy behind it. Think about how you can define your craftsmanship. Think about how you want to invest in the people that's actually building this. And lastly, just remember, we are all just people building stuff for people with people. So at the heart of it, it is us. And I love the fact that a lot of talks today champion this, champion the fact that we are all human. And we want to keep that as a part of the process we build our products. Thank you.